Listener discretion is advised. This podcast may include profanity and discussion of sensitive topics. Any opinions expressed are those of the speaker and do not reflect the opinions of any other person or entity. Welcome to episode 17 of The Real Future. I'm photographer John Nyboer, and I started this podcast to share the stories and perspectives behind the world's largest arts movement. My guest today is Boogie Frantick. Born and raised in LA, Frantick is an original member of the Great One-Eighters and also represents the Funny Bones and Mighty Zulu Kings crews. His foundation is popping, and his influential trademark style has made him a sought-after dancer, including work with Snoop Dogg, Talib Kweli, An Egyptian Lover, and appearances on Dancing with the Stars, So You Think You Can Dance, and the late-night shows of both Jimmy Fallon and Conan O'Brien. He's also an educator and takes his role in the community seriously as someone who is passing the torch to the next generation. We get into that topic, learn about how he integrated mime and animation into his dance, and talk about his personal story and how dance saved his life. So let's get into the real future with Boogie Frantick. Boogie Frantick.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the real future.
It's a cool name.
Thank you, and thanks so much for being here. It's really great to have you here because you're somebody that a lot of my other guests have mentioned
Right.
as an influence. You are number 17.
Sick.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I started this in February, and people have enjoyed it. I'm getting some traffic, and so it's great to have you here. And I usually start out pretty much the same way. Do you remember your first? What's your first dance memory?
My first dance memory ever, and I confirmed this with a cousin of mine. I was 2 years old, actually. And I remember back then the theaters used to have stages, like the movie theaters used to have stages.
Sure, like the ones on Broadway.
Yeah. With the red curtains, and they would open up, and then you would get like the screen. I guess they thought, well, theater to theater to theater. It was just, I guess it wasn't like today where you have curved screens and
Right. Well, plus a lot of those were built when vaudeville was still alive,
exactly.
So they would have stuff on those stages, right?
Yeah, performances, all that. So yeah, like the red velvet seats, all that. I remember we went as a family to watch a movie, and I'm not sure if it was like a breaking movie or something like that, but it was 1984. I'm 2 years old. I just remember being really hesitant to go on stage with all my family and go dance, but everybody was on stage dancing
because
I was just
before the movie, or
just before the movie, how they play music sometimes,
Yeah.
Well, now they have commercials or whatnot, but back even just maybe a decade ago, they used to play music,
Right,
and
right.
it would just be kind of sounds coming on and whatnot. So back then, it was music of the day. So you're hearing 80s tracks. People are basically, breakdancing at the time, or it was what they called it back then, right? Here,
Yeah.
especially here in LA. So, everybody was on stage doing the breakdance. It's crazy to call it that. But, yeah, so I was hesitant to go on stage, but I remember being like one of the last people to jump up on there and did like just a simple little move, and that was like really a very, very interesting memory because I thought it was like, I didn't think it was real.
Because you're two, right? This is like what I'm thinking the whole time. Like I'm not sure I
Yeah.
remember anything from when I was two.
Yeah, so I asked my cousin, and I was like, do you ever remember us going to the theater one time and we were all up there dancing, and I just remember maybe like being really hesitant to go up there but I ended up on the stage with you guys, and I was dancing with like everybody. It was just kind of weird. And she was just like, how do you remember that? And I go, I just remember being really young. Like I was a baby young,
Yeah.
And she was like, dude, she's like, you had to be like 2 years old, So yeah, so it goes as far back as that. I was already kind of indoctrinated into the culture itself, or what it was here at least, like pop culture more so.
Do you remember like what part of LA did you grow up in?
At that time, it was like a mixture between the San Fernando Valley and East LA, like El
Okay.
Sereno.
You're going back and forth?
Yeah.
El Sereno, yes. So you were going to a theater, might have been a downtown theater, right?
Probably somewhere. It could have been maybe Alhambra. I know Alhambra at the time had a really cool theater like that. So I wasn't sure but if the cousin I asked, my cousin Lydia, if she was in there, most likely we were in East LA. So more than likely we were in that Alhambra theater. So, but my brothers were dancers. My sister Nitani was a dancer. My sister Priscilla not so much, but I remember my sister Nitani also having a dance crew, and I don't remember my age, but I was anywhere.
But we're talking the early to mid '80s here for sure, right?
Yeah.
And so are they all breaking or break dancing?
Yeah, I know, right?
Or are they going to Venice Beach at this point?
Not even that. I think it was just more so everything was pretty local. Yeah, like I remember people would come up to the house in cardboards, like their own little crazy cutout cardboards, and call my brother out and stuff. I remember that. But then like late 80s, my sister was more into party dancing. So everything from like the Roger Rabbit, Running Man, RoboCop, the Fila, all those types of party dances, which to me is still hip hop, you know? It's like, it's still a part of that. That I also was introduced to. So that was something that I kind of was really trying to incorporate. I don't think nobody knew I was actually dancing that heavy, but I would watch them practice, her and her little crew that she had, and then I would wait till she would leave and they would leave, and I would try to do my own thing. So, but I had my own taste in music. That was kind of my thing as well.
How were you like? Did your family have records or tapes, or where were you getting your music?
I would say, I don't know if you want, it's going to pick that up.
It'll be in the background, but these are close range. It's going to be all right.
Cool. Yeah, like, I mean, it was different, like vinyl, cassette tapes, a lot of cassette tapes. I know that.
So what was your taste? How did it differ from?
You know, I was into soundtracks. I was into, like techno as well. I was into hip hop as well, but I wasn't really into mainstream music. Like a lot of people loved Michael Jackson, and I loved the way he danced. I loved him as an artist, but I wasn't like, my favorite song of Michael was like Scream. But that's just, you know, that's one of them. And I think it was because of the dance that he did and showcased in that video that made me like, okay.
So you always liked dance, but you didn't. Sounds like you liked Electro.
Yeah.
So you did like dance music, but you didn't like everything.
It wasn't everything. Funk music I grew up to funk music and like freestyle and high energy, which is like a different freestyle, you know? It's really, that's a very particular sound, I think, that not a lot of people really know about. Disco, I had moments of disco. My mom would play some stuff, but ballads, you know, Simply Red to Sade, like really beautiful sounds. I don't know. I didn't really do mainstream so much. I kind of just wanted to keep digging for like rare things, you know?
Right. Did you go to the I remember for me, I got into music really young. My older sister bought me my first record. I was probably 5, right? So I got into rock and roll, like classic rock.
Yeah.
Right?
Classic rock.
All that stuff's imprinted in my brain.
Right.
And by the time the period you're talking about came around, I thought I was too cool for like dance music. You know, now I love all that stuff. But back then I thought I was more into guitar oriented stuff, right? And I kind of fell prey to that whole disco sucks thing that was huge in the, and now I realize, oh my God, that was like this. Yeah, now I realize what that was about, right? I was like basically anti-gay, it was like racist and anti-gay movement. But I didn't know as a little kid. I just thought it was like, you know,
and trying to take sounds away from, you know, certain communities, and
like, for sure,
we're gonna steal this vibe and make it more masculine and all that stuff. But I honestly, like, as I got older, I would go to thrift shops and go crate digging. That's like, crate digging is just looking for vinyl. And I would go, and I remember, you know, like buying, you know, vinyl for 25 cents to 15 cents to 5 cents, like basically under $1, you know. rarely anything like over 50 cents. Like it was kind of wild if you had that, and it had to be, I guess, super mainstream or popular type of album. But yeah, I had Isley Brothers, Black Sabbath, Santana. I remember finding this Jelly Bean vinyl, which was like kind of like a various artists, and ended up having the Mexican in it. I was like, what the fuck? You know, like this is dope. Like this has the Mexican. Like I found the Mexican on the vinyl. You know, I'm like my homies at the time when I was in my dance crew back then. I was like, bro, I have a classic here, you know. So it was really interesting. What else I had?
Did you grow up around a lot of Mexican music?
Yes and no. Like I grew up to a lot. My uncles had a band, so they would play a lot of like not necessarily banda style music, but more ranchero style. So. It was my uncles were influenced by my grandfather. My grandfather was like a Texan, so, and he was kind of like Texan to the core. I didn't really see that until now. When I look back, I'm like, that makes sense.
So like Tejano, like with their accordion,
yeah,
kind of
like they had, and him and his brothers had a band. So it was like a trio at one point. So, but it was just like more. I don't know how to explain their style of music, but it was kind of like sort of funky, different. Yeah, like it wasn't really all Spanish music, you know. So,
right.
But you know, I grew up alongside like hearing like Tinto Puente and like Pancho Sanchez, and just like really kind of taking in different cultural aspects of Latin music in a sense. Yeah. Or música latina, I guess. But it was more also every uncle had their particular taste. You know, like my favorite instrument that would be played was the congas. And to me, that was like so many random patterns of hand rhythms that was just like, how do you make this movable, you know? Whereas my uncle on the guitar would make, you know, airplane and helicopter sounds and just kind of like go into riffs and just like get lost in the sauce. But my cousin Eddie would drum like with his eyes closed. And I'm just going, what the fuck, dude? Like he's not even seeing the pattern. Like, but I'm looking at the sticks move and I can see the trails of like light that he's creating from the movement. So to me, I was just very visual at the same time versus just what I'm hearing, you know? So it's kind of a mixture of both. And I think that's what made me understand how I like what I do can actually emphasize music that much more.
Yeah. Okay. So like, you sound like you're a pretty little kid at this point.
Yeah.
And then when do you really start? Was popping your first style?
I guess. I mean, if a wave, you know, most people would get mad at me for saying that, but if like doing this is not popping, then I don't know. Like back then, it was popping. So I'm gonna just say, yeah, like pretty much was kind of pushed into it. And
so you never got into breaking.
Breaking, I didn't get into until my teenage years.
Okay,
that's when I really started. I did like a knee spin when I was a little kid, but who didn't? You know, watching Boogaloo Shrimp knee spin.
Yeah.
To me, I was just like, that looks so fun. You know, but yeah, it was more party dancing, and then I got into popping. But I was really good at mime. That was something that was kind of an extra addition. Very young, I could pick up like playfulness on that level. So I could really imitate certain objects and make it look as if I'm actually really using it. So my friends...
So this goes way back with you.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you've never seen Frantic dance, I mean, this is like core element.
Yeah.
So it's... Did you think of it as miming, like when you're in junior high, or you're just like,
yeah,
I do this?
Yeah, I did.
And
I saw, like, you know, back then you see black and white movies. If you stay up late enough, you see a lot of black and white movies. So I would see, you know, the Charlie Chaplins, and then I know I seen a lot of Marcel.
Marceau.
Yeah, Marceau. Like I would see like random moments where he would come out, and then there was other mimes that I couldn't figure out who these people were because it's such.
They would. You're right though. Like the only one I know is Marcel.
Yeah,
but,
even PBS.
But they would show up on.
Like,
Yeah, or even those. There used to be so many performance-based shows on TV, right?
Yeah.
Mostly dance and music, and then they'd bring out a mime, or even the late night shows. Or what we think of now as the late night shows, they'd bring out some entertainer.
Yeah.
You're totally right.
Yeah, it was very.
Remember Senor Wences?
Yeah.
With the box.
Yeah.
Yes. No.
Yes. But it was different shows. Yeah, hand puppets, like all these things were really kind of, sort of, influenced me into creating like a lot of character within. Just even hanging out with my friends, and I would just get bored, so I would just make them all laugh, and that was kind of a cool thing for me. It was just understanding I had the power to impact them.
So when did this start to connect with a dance form that you approached, from a disciplined fashion, or like, I don't know quite the right wording for it, but you kind of had this instinct for performance and for mimicry. And at some point, this must have come together with popping, and you took it seriously. And who was your first mentor? Maybe that's a good place to.
Well, honestly, I didn't have one for a very long time. So I started picking up more so, I think, like actually incorporating popping into just practice I was either 8 or 9 years old. I want to say 9. I always tell people 9 years old, but I think it was probably earlier. But I just
9's a good number.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, started in 91, but I watched my cousin's boyfriend at the time, Jimmy, gave me a VHS tape. He goes, "Here, I got something for you," because he knew I loved dance, and I think because I was like sort of popping, but not really. I was kind of in this freestyle world because my family would always throw fucking parties, bro. Like backyard boogies was just our shit, So
this is the context in which you're dancing is mostly family parties.
Always, always. Okay. Like my uncles had a band, so we would go to lakes not far from here, like up north before even
Kachuma
Palmdale. No, even
or
closer, like Robin's Nest, which is like right in off the 14 freeway off of Soledad. You keep going, and next thing you know, there's like these just campsites randomly. They used to have really nice lakes back then. Used to get a lot of water from our rains back then. I miss you, rains, even though we had some yesterday. But yeah, it was like really crazy because I was just always dancing. So her ex-boyfriend basically gave me a VHS tape, and it was Beat Street. And I just remember like my brain just going, and I was like, why do I know this movie? And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I'm home alone. I'm kind of just always home alone. So movies was my shit. Like I just would watch movies and over and over and over and over again. So that was one way that people knew, like, what, this kid's at home, let me shoot him a film. But he gave me this Beat Street video, and I was just like, that was it. I was like, I'm gonna put this into my movement. And it was crazy because I picked up popping from that movie, not from breaking. But it did give me some nostalgic memories of like my family, of that moment of being on the stage in that theater. And then I think also from seeing the movie Breaking. And I was like,
which came a couple years later.
Yeah, and I even think Breaking Electric Boogaloo as well. But I was like, there's something else out there, Like I remember even the pilot, that random series that came out. It was like a girl who would have to wear a helmet and like these goggles and hide her face, and she was like the illest breaker.
I have no idea about this. It was like, sounds amazing.
But they kind of like, she would come and she would have to dress up in this costume to basically be the dopest breaker, but because she was a girl, it wasn't really respected. So it was like really weird. It was a really dope series, super random. But I remember seeing like Freak Show on people's backs and their jackets, and I was like, oh, this is crazy. Like this is actually real cats in this series, But that was, again, memory. This watching Beat Street brought back all these memories of moments in East LA. So this is like me now in the San Fernando Valley. So yeah, Beat Street was it. I was stuck. I just seen Lee do this movement, and I was like, and the way he pieced it together, I was like, I can do that. I know I can do that. So I started to kind of mimic the ideas, and then watching like Wiggles and Fable and the rest of the other dancers on there, like anytime Lee or Wiggles and Fable would pop, I was just like glued to, watching it, and just like, and then there was like this random dude in the club, and the way he just like freaks his body in like these certain positions, like right when, I think it was the DJ, when this like camera pans through the club, and it was like this dope little moment, but like those little small moments for me were like enough to make me kind of emulate this style.
Were you watching Soul Train at all?
Back when I was a kid, yeah. I would watch it.
Yeah, that's what
that would be also my Saturdays. I would try to jump on and see if I could catch it. I didn't know what times it would come on. I would just be on TV hoping that I would just like...
This is a trip. Like,
yeah.
I'm trying to think of other dancers that I talked to that had... Actually, she was a little bit like this, kind of like yourself, where it seems like this really organic process where you didn't really get involved in like the culture or a peer group that was doing this for a while.
Yeah.
So when did you get into when did you start battling? Or
middle school?
Okay,
yeah,
okay, not that late.
My
then.
first battle, I think I was like 6 or 7.
What?
But I was my sister kind of set me up at this quinceañera, and she made me kind of battle her crewmates. And it was like these two brothers, and they're like doing flips over each other and shit, like totally fucking served my ass. But I still was like doing my running man and Roger Rabbit and mixed, and I would jump down into a half split and just like, fuck, like, all right, that's pretty much all I got. But I remember trying to pick up more moves, and then my cousin Jerry as well was a dancer, so he would dress in like the whole silky outfits and like the linen outfits with the loafers, like MC Hammer back then.
Yeah.
So he was like, he would do all the movements, and I was just like, I got to learn all this stuff. Like, I got to figure out how to do it. But I remember they were like, and he was in a crew, come to find out, like, he was part of a big crew that was out there in the valley as well. So I had a lot of like sort of pick and choose moments, and just kind of put it all into like, popping. And then when I got to middle school is when I got into my first crew. But it also made me realize I'm not the only motherfucker doing this,
Right, but now at leisure at school, and I imagine at lunchtime you're doing it, right? You got your cardboard out.
It's like it was an after school dance, and I went after the first person I knew was popping. And I remember smoking his ass, dude. Like, I remember just like going after.
That's hilarious.
And everybody was like, "Who the fuck is this like random kid, like this 7th grader, this scrub coming out of nowhere, and like going after this like 9th grader? He's about to graduate into high school." And then dude was like, "Fuck, like this dude doesn't stop, So I was like, I got fucking moves for days, bro, because I've been practicing this shit, But yeah, like even going back to elementary, I would come to school and try to show my friends like movements, and then I remember my friend Paul would just give me like the most stankest face, like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Do you have any idea? This is it seems like there's like two types of people basically, right? There's the person who does the weird thing, and people make fun of them, and then they may not stop doing it, but they do it alone, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the people like yourself who are just like,
I'm gonna try this out.
I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea where you get that kind of like confidence or like,
I think,
caring about that kind of peer pressure?
I think it's because I was home alone for a long time. Mm-hmm. Like, I was the youngest of all of my siblings, and
how many siblings you got?
I was 4. I used to have 4. Now 3, but they're like the youngest out of them is like 5 years older than me. So, and even the cousins we grew up with, they're all even, older than that. So I really didn't have anybody my age other than 3 of my cousins.
So you were probably used to
catching some shit too.
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
they probably loved you, but also probably messed with you a lot.
Yeah,
'cause,
they were
you're
just like, don't
little kid.
like like all right, yeah, he's gonna do this and he's gonna do that. But I learned really quick, what to do, what not to do, how to protect myself, how to defend myself,
Yeah.
like really, really fast. So I think I didn't really get to enjoy, as most kids do, like being a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I had to grow up really fast,
Yeah.
know. But yeah, that was sort of my artistic value, I think, just kind of like naturally, I know I can be really good at this.
Yeah, that's really interesting though, because there's a lot of things you could have
Yeah.
thought you could have been good at.
I mean,
that-
I could have played instruments. I could have played multiple
Yeah,
instruments.
or you could have been a punk ass,
I was-
right? You could,
yeah,
you
yeah,
could have been
yeah.
like, you could have been a problem.
I know I was ambidextrous. I was even told, you used to put your pencil and your spoon in your right hand, and like it's weird. I kick with my left, I throw with my right. So it's like I was already on different plane, but not that it's like I'm like, oh my God, I was like special, but it's just
No, you don't. It doesn't sound like that. I'm
always
asking you to
felt-
talk
yeah,
about this. So.
Yeah, I always felt like I went against the grain for a reason.
Right.
But to learn, like to really learn, not just, even if it was a mistake, like I was like, yep, I fucked up. Like, let me go ahead and come back
Next,
and
yeah,
backtrack.
let's do it again.
Yeah. So
when does is Funny Bones your first crew?
Funny Bones, yeah. Funny Bones. No, actually, my first crew was this crew called the Wrecking Crew. And I started that in 7th grade.
Okay.
Then I got into a party crew called the Immortals. Then after that, I was kind of like the only dude from the Wrecking Crew really doing anything. So I was led to meet my big brother Hayes. He was like sort of the mentor later.
Okay.
Later on when I was like 14. 12, 13, I met him. And he didn't realize he was my mentor. You know what I mean? He just was kind of the dude that was just like, kind of, let's do this. Like, let's, if you guys want to learn how to dance this, like, look at what they're doing overseas. And he just opened our worlds even further.
And he was an older guy in the neighborhood, or he was?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was older. He was like a K-Day mix master, but like a younger. Yeah, he was a younger generation K-Day mix master. So he was like a bridge gap. Like I'm a bridge gap. It's kind of weird. Like it's not in that.
You're a bridge between. This is actually something I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
So you're a bridge between.
I'm a bridge between like the OGs
Meaning the first generation of poppers, street dancers.
And like we were the ones reinventing, like not reinventing the wheel, but reliving the wheel in the 90s. So I felt like, from my observation and what I saw from music videos to even the radio stations, how they transitioned into hip hop or back into hip hop, because they try to take it away. And I felt like the media kind of started realizing like, oh shit, hip hop is really on its way back somehow.
I mean,
So
it's all about money for the.
Yeah. But magazines back then, before The Source, before XXL.
Yeah, no, I mean,
there was like Rap Pages. They did a whole segment on Rocksteady Crew, and then they did a segment on Air Force Crew, and then they did a segment on Elite Force, and then even the Lockers and like the Poppers from back in like the breaking movies.
Right.
So it was really dope to have one magazine that had all influences that I remember watching growing up, and then also currently watching while in the 90s.
Yeah.
So seeing like Ken Swift in the front page, and then going into Rocksteady, and then talking about like it would then boom got into Air Force Crew, and I'm listening to like, or I'm reading Mr. Animations, and then it's like Little Caesar and all them. Then it goes into like Elite Force and how
and is this all
hip-hop.
LA based?
This was a magazine,
but I don't know.
No, this was all within a magazine.
No. I know, but these crews, are these all LA crews?
No, this is like New York and the West Coast,
Okay,
so it's like a mix. And then towards the end, it was like the LA Lockers, like being able to read from Fred Berry and like from Penguin, from Don Campbell, rest in peace, like both. Like it was really dope to just get their insights, Shabadoo, rest in peace. Like a lot of their, just how they started and how everything, you know, was. And it was just like a history lesson within a culture that I'm actually already kind of diving into, you know. And I remember even that same day I bought that magazine. I bought Beats.
Which magazine?
Rap Pages.
Rap Pages.
I remember buying Beats, Rhymes, and Life as a CD. That was when it first came out. So I think it's like 93.
I don't know. I will cross-check that, though.
Yeah. Maybe 93. So that was, I remember my mom took me to this record shop in Burbank, and I was like, I got to get this, you know? And it was just like, this is like, these are all my icons, you know what I mean? Like, these are people I've watched on these VHS tapes that we'd be passing around each other. So it just kind of opened up a whole different world, and I realized like we can tour, you can actually do this across the globe, you know. And I remember from Hayes showing me videos of like Steen and cats from Denmark and Air Force Crew Japan and other cats from Europe and Battle of the Year, UK B-Boy Champ. So all of that was being relived, you know. Like this is like late information for Europe, but new information also for me. So it's kind of like they're reliving the history while we're reliving this moment now. So that was kind of our flooding, you know.
So you were like, so when you're like a bridge. I mean, I think most basically you're saying you're a bridge between like the first and second generation of street dancers.
I would say second.
Between the second and third?
Second, between the second and third, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's from what you're saying, what I'm also picking up is that you're like in this bridge generation that really took this shit global.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was kind of global, but not like, I mean, now it's like...
No, now it's a whole different
like,
world, yeah.
It's just really, I mean, I want my little summary of this podcast calls it the world's largest arts movement.
Right.
Because I don't have the numbers. I've looked, but I mean, you know, if you show me that I'm wrong, I'll back down. But I don't think it's close, honestly.
Yeah, it's crazy. And
so you're like the first. Is Funny Bones the first thing that you're a part of that's really cohesive, that has
within this century? Within this century,
in your dance life.
Yeah, my dance life.
Your dance life.
So for the 21st century, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first crew I was in was Air Force Crew.
Right.
That was like my goal. You know, I wanted to be next to Mr. Animation, Mr. E, and Chuco. And I was like, I need to rock with these dudes because they're like LA to the core, you know? To me, that was a perspective of animation, kind of a free flow. And then you had Mr. Animation, who was just like hard-ass pops and like it's that really dope gangster vibe. So I really wanted to rock with these guys. So I pushed my mentor, Hayes, who was a part of the crew, to like get me be a part of the family. So it kind of pushed into it, but by that time, it was already kind of too late. Like,
they were dissolving?
Yeah, they were dissolving. All the poppers ended up stepping away due to their issues within their own politics and became universal B-boys with B-boy Ivan. So it was B-boy Ivan, Mystery, Chuco, and Animation. It was just like... damn, you know. So,
but you did get to learn from these guys, even though
I picked up a lot. Yeah,
sustain.
we did a lot of shows at like early 2000s. We did a lot of shows together. So, these dudes were just schooling me on like natural basis, you know. And I was like already looking up to these guys as like icons. So I just really wanted to pick their brains at some points, you know. And like I realized what questions not to ask, and then how to get the information, you know? So that's really what it taught me. It was like valuable lessons on how to be a good student without actually claiming you're a student. So it was really interesting. But yeah, after that, it was then I got into Funny Bones crew because I started doing a lot of showcases within the Latin music, like where it was Latin hip hop. or hip hop artists that were Latinos. I should say that.
Who were some of the early examples of that? 'Cause that never gets talked about, really.
Cypress Hill, you know, you have even Sin Dog's brother. It's like, yeah, you had Proper Dose, you had who else? Kid Frost.
Okay,
Mellow
okay. So we're
Mellow
later.
Man
I thought
Ace.
you were a little earlier. I see where you are now.
Yeah, we're later.
In terms of the years.
Yeah,
We're
like
into the 90s now.
No, we're into 2000s,
2000s now?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. These guys are making a comeback in some way because reggaeton kind of brought back the rapping aspect of like Latinos can rap, you know, and but also the beat nuts were a mix, you know.
Yeah.
Like you had Big Pun as well, that was like mainstream. Tony Touch, like he was throwing in a lot of this, like there was more East Coast, but it was still influencing like the music. So it was like there was a really good movement of rappers that were, you know, rapping in Spanish, and that was kind of a movement. So I remember, you know, Mellow Man Ace hosting these events, and it was called the Urbano
Ace.
movement. Yeah,
Hypus from Cyprus, right?
yeah, that's his brother's Sin Dog. His brother's Sin Dog. Yeah, they're
okay.
and I think their uncle was Bobo. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, it was
No,
crazy.
I like to get the names out. You know, that's what I'm
Yeah,
asking
yeah.
because like that's the history,
and
right?
Bobo was like Soul Assassins. Like that's kind of crazy. So you had a lot of mixture of like the underground movement with, you know, people also that were mainstream but very much still connected to the roots. But here in LA, it was a lot of like, you know, Latino rappers that were just up and coming. And one of my homies, Red Eyes, rest in peace, he was like performing a lot. So I was like, anytime I could jump on stage with him. And then I was really close with Jekyll from LA. So Jekyll, I would end up meeting at these shows. Burst Rock, I ended up meeting at these shows, and that's how I got into Funny Bones. Was actually meeting him at a jam that happened in Sun Valley. They were battling the LA Boppers, and it was him and this cat Warlock. So it was the first two Funny Bones members, and then we kind of started seeing each other at different events, especially in the Latin community. So that's how we ended up becoming Funny Bones.
Who started Funny Bones?
Burst Rock and Warlock, yeah.
And you've got, what anniversary is it coming up?
Looking at probably...
I just saw the flyer today and it just said anniversary, and I was like, oh, what number is it?
15, 16, 17, I want to say. I mean, for them, it's probably longer, but I want to say for me, it was about...
I meant for the crew itself, but...
No, yeah, the crew itself, it's maybe almost getting the 20-year mark. Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy.
That's gonna... You're gonna be at that,
Yeah, I mean...
that's gonna be great. I've got that on my calendar. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I know that there's two events happening on the same day, and it's like all within the time frame of like a Great Wineter event, Flavor of the Year, and Freestyle Session.
Yes, that always all occurs all in one big mess.
It's a big mess.
That's true.
It's a big mess.
So you got into Funny Bones when you're like...
Early 20s.
Early 20s,
Yeah.
okay. And then that's when you really... Is that when you really started to make a name for yourself? Or
I think by then, yes, because I was very much like a local dancer.
Yeah.
Like throughout the 90s into the early 2000s. And then events like B-Boy Summit started coming to LA because I used to be in San Diego. And the Radiotron started coming back. So since I was connected with Air Force, I was at the Radiotrons. And then at the B-Boy Summits is where it was kind of like people didn't really know who I was at the time. And to me, I kind of enjoyed that. I like really milked it for what I could. But I know one thing that stood out the most was my tick walk. Like being able to tick my feet and just like sharpen my movement, and people were just like, yo, this is crazy, you know? Like wasn't into boogaloo, I wasn't into like electric boogaloo style popping. It was just more so like I had my own little flavor, you know?
You were like animation before you had a name for it, sounds like.
Yeah, ticking was Frantick is my name, but it's still, that was a very solid form of foundation for me.
And who gave you that name?
I did. I gave it to myself.
You give it to yourself.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
the boogie part,
The boogie was
I
given
get.
to me. Yeah.
What the frantic part? What's that about?
Frantic was more so the, like, what I saw internally, like, happening, like all these things, all these different elements. Like, it was like kind of like a mad scientist, you know, just creating these potions, and then like all of a sudden it's just like this magic of movement and this connection of sound. So it was like basically I have this fucking mad scientist inside of me, and it's just creating these, you know, styles or these approaches to the dance.
This is great because like this is the kind of shit that this is one of the reasons I started this, right? Is like I wonder about these things, like even if we get a chance to talk a little bit, like it's usually too loud or the next thing happens.
Mm-hmm.
But frantic always mystified me because you present as someone who's very calm, right? You have a calm exterior, and also your dance style is more smooth than it is frantic. So it's like the inside, and you're translating.
If you see me dance when I was younger, it was very much like everything was just, I would just hit everything. I would try to connect to every single rhythm, and I would try to multiply myself into 2 different rhythms at once. So I had this like ability to use footwork of my own, but incorporate the texture of popping on top of it. And then I would use a lot of dime stops to kind of create these like certain images. So almost like a photographer taking photos, like that's kind of how I wanted to move. But I also thought about like the old school black and white movies where everything's frame for frame, but we just see it as like a motion.
Andre talks about this a lot.
Yeah, so you see it as a motion of movement, but it really is frame for frame.
When did you may not know the answer to this, but I'm wondering when you went from being like, okay, so you're like a kid, you kind of instinctive, been in a couple crews tangentially, and now you're in Funny Bones, right? And that's a pretty big commitment. And when did you become someone, like, because ever since I've known you, it's been like, oh, Boogie Frantick's in the house, right? Do you, and I know you're like, yeah, I'm not trying to be awkward to you to brag about yourself. I'm just trying to, was there a moment where you realized, oh, now it's like Boogie Frantick's in the house, and your style was so significant that it became that? Was there a moment or a turning point for that?
I think, it was a turning point. It was a lot of different moments all at once. I think that's kind of what happened. But I think the work that I put in, like from, I would say 98 to 2010, was like I was never gonna not be in a circle, never gonna not be on stage. I wasn't gonna like option myself whether I wanted to be at an event or not. It was like I had to be at this event. I had to get in whether I could afford it or not. I had to compete because I just have to like represent for something and represent for those that aren't able to do be where I am, you know? So I took advantage of a lot to kind of just be as present as possible for everybody and anybody. So if it was like an event where you would mix breakers and poppers, like I was down. If it was before even All Styles was a thing, like can you freestyle like your battles, I wanted to be in it. But the commercial aspect kind of started to really help influence. Like there's a possibility for other people like myself that can actually have opportunities. And I think that was also kind of the drive for it too.
What was the first big job that you got? Do you remember that? You must remember that.
For me, it was doing a showcase in Australia, just judging. But the showcase itself kind of made an impact to the the dance community. I think it just was the showcase that people were like, damn, this is what I thrive for. you know. And I remember I used DJ Shadow as a showcase song, and most people were using funk songs, or they were showcasing popping in a funky way, and I was like, fuck that. Like, I'm gonna fucking make these motherfuckers cry right now. I'm gonna build this world, and everybody's gonna see exactly where I am. And I did, you know. So that was like my first really actually stage where people got to see me piece together an entire, even my outfit to my hat to everything, like really be out there on the stage performing what I wanted to perform.
Did you make people cry?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
where it's at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had people shocked. They were just like, I've never seen popping like that before. And I was like, I know. I know. And you're gonna like get used to it.
Where were you at? Like, in terms of your storytelling, like you are a very all dancers seem to talk about storytelling, but then you're someone who's like, it's, even if I don't know what the story is, like I know what's going on. It's you that's very on the surface with you. What was going on with you at the time, like that? This Australian time, like, I guess what I'm getting at is when you're storytelling and when you're really generating that emotion through your art, are you thinking about, you know, a specific family member, or is it more like abstract? You know, like in Australia, was there something you were going through at that time that you channeled?
I think I was just like, holy shit, I'm in a different place of the world, you know, like how did I end up here? Like, it was kind of a gratitude kind of situation. More so, like, it wasn't about like the loss or anything like that, or family. Like, usually that's kind of a drive, but this one was more so like, how do I influence these people to just be themselves and inspire them to understand that, like, you have to respect the culture so deep that you can then eventually make whatever you want of it, you know, but still find a way to always give back. Like, it was like trying to give this whole entire story of just look at how much they've given us and what we're not doing with it.
This sounds like the mission statement of another organization that you co-founded, the Great One-Eighters, right? Yeah, the Great One-Eighters are... I'm just going to give a capsule just for people who don't know. You all met when you were teenagers or in your early 20s, is that?
No, they were teenagers.
They were teenagers.
I was in my early 20s.
So were you more like a mentor figure for them?
I was their big brother.
You were their big brother. Okay, that I didn't know.
Through hip hop.
But I mean, we're going to get into this, but I just look up the Great One-Eighters online, like, amazing.
GR818ERS.
Exactly. And I link out to this stuff too, so I'll make sure that gets in the show notes and on the screen. But, like, these guys do, like, I learned about them through the dance world because you're heavily rooted in street dance, but then there's wrestling.
Yeah.
There's like car shows, there's skateboarding.
Yeah.
Like, this is a legitimately friends who grew up in the neighborhood and formed a legit nonprofit that sustains itself to this day. And if you got money to donate it to these guys, because
they learned from all of our mistakes and created an amazing organization.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah. What was your role then? If like at that time were you involved in, like, filling out paperwork, or, like, what was your...
No, even back then, like, when I did that showcase, it was, you know, it was for them. It was for all of us here. They were still kids. We were still, like, you know, going out, partying, and they were, like, barely, you know, I mean, Roxwip's 10 years younger than me. Devious is 9, so, like, it's like a generational gap, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So these guys were, like, young teenagers when I first met them, and I got really close to their father, and that's basically how we became like really good friends. But it was like he also looked out for me, like because I was struggling with my life and trying to figure out if I wanted to dance full time or just work a job. So I was like going through different jobs and like, but dance kept pulling me in so many different directions that it was hard. It was hard to really kind of like handle dance and just be completely committed to it, because it was like I want to do the street style, but then I started getting commercial work. So it was like really by 2008, which is when I was in Australia, was like I remember working this job and committing myself to being a big brother to both of these boys, and I just wanted to help them be the support system, not be their father figure or not replace, you know, the loss of their father, unfortunately. I just wanted to be there to assist in whatever way I possibly can. So, they really, they took me in as a big bro, and I just kind of kept the culture alive within them, and, you know, found ways to keep the spirit of their dad pushing them to want to, you know, pursue this, continue this, and be a part of this, and just maintain it, you know. I remember staying up late at night and downloading music with Rock Swift. Now he's, you know, an international DJ.
Yeah.
You know, and with Devious, it was more so like, you know, like dance more than just one style. Like mix it up, like learn these different things. And, you know, now he's very much, well, like wrestling was already his thing because of school. And he had a mentor, this cat, like he wanted to really be like, you know, he had the ability to be a champion, like, so that was really cool to also have that influence in his life and learn how to direct his aggression in that way. So it was a really cool discipline for him to pick up, and that's how even Rock Swift would, like, if they played football, they played football together. If they wrestled together. It was very like much, you know, they chose to pick these things up along with Pierre being a part of that group. So it was really, really interesting, like just growing up and pushing them to be just great at anything they decided to do, you know. And I remember wanting to show them how to throw house parties and like flyer parties. So we'd make flyers, and I'm like, just pass them out to everybody, or pass them out to all the girls, and just if girls go, everybody else will show up. So, and it got so crazy.
You're a genius.
Yeah, it got so deep that I remember even like there was a lingerie party in my backyard, and I was like, I am not going outside. You know, I'm like, this is everybody's under 18 for sure. I'm not about to be outside right now. Like, this is not my place. And I remember Rock Swift like, yo, bro, like, come out and enjoy. I'm like, nope, I'm good. I'm straight. He just would laugh like, damn. But I just was like, wow, dude, like they really made things happen. And the interesting part was they created like a really good team at the time. And that's kind of where all of that started to kind of like rival, and we started playing with the name Great Winators. And I remember mentioning it, like it was kind of it came from the song Regulators. So it was like, you know, it said the 2 and 3 will regulate. There's like a rhyme in there. But we started saying the Great 1-8 will regulate. It kind of rhymes. Yes, it rhymes like
all the way through, man.
Or even the 8-1-8 will regulate. So it was just really like when we say the Great 1-8, it was just nicely like wordplay.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh well, if we represent the Great 1-8, then you're a Great 1-8er. And kind of that's where we started writing. We started printing the names on shirts, like Great 1-8ers. And I wanted them to experience things that helped me understand the importance of even just living in a club environment and just like being a club kid growing up to dancing, like dancing being the priority, not the partying aspect.
Well, that's it's great that you said that, because I'm kind of thinking while you're talking about this that like a lot of this stuff could take a left turn.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely. And it did. Like there was times where jealousy would come in, and I remember, you know, randomly these dudes got into like a big old brawl, And it was just like, they all came home, and I was like, what happened? They're like, bro, like, we're not doing this. Like, this is not the business, you know? And so don't get me wrong, like they're gonna push a positive story because they have to. It's a nonprofit. But the reality behind it is like, yeah, they remember them coming home, and it was just like, they were just, who are these guys rocking these shirts? Like, who do they think they are? And like, it almost became like a defensive situation.
Well, because, I mean, you're in LA, or you're in the Valley, right? And part of gang culture is representing, right? Yeah. So that's what I was going to ask you. Like, how did you or they or all of you distinguish between those two worlds? Because it doesn't really sound like
we're gangsters.
Anybody wanted to go out and throw down or you know,
it wasn't
get involved with get in the system or anything like that, right? Like,
even myself growing up, like, I was super anti-gang, you know, but I grew up around it. I had the characteristics of it, you know, like you kind of get hand down this. Both of my brothers are gangsters. Like, one of them is doing fucking 13 years in prison, still going to prison. And, you know, my other brother is 6 feet under. So it's like all because of that environment. But me choosing dance over everything, their family as well. Like, their family has gang influences like that. I mean, their dad was also, you know, influenced by gangs. So it was like, we're creating this turning point of like, yeah, we could still be hood, but we don't have to necessarily be like everybody else and be the statistics like everybody else.
Well, there's the hood that there's loyalty and pride, and
very much
and this kind of thing. But then there's like the criminal aspect of it, which sounds like you are like, so yeah, like, was that a conscious thing to avoid the criminal aspect of
it's realizing, like, even younger, like, I'll drop back to high school. Mm-hmm. I would argue with all of my teachers that would teach U.S. history or American history, because I'm going, this teaches me nothing about who I am. Like, I know you don't see that, and I know you see all of us as Americans, and even that's incorrect, because we're from the United States.
Thank
America
you.
is
Dude,
like completely...
I have actually been consciously trying to not say...
Yeah, like, that's so... Like...
My dad, I'm sorry to cut you. My dad, who was born in 1924, rest in peace.
Wow.
Grew up in the Midwest.
Whoa.
And, you know, moved out here in the 60s, right? He was from a very, very conservative religious family. He told my brother and I growing up, he's like, don't go to Mexico and say you're American. He's like, North America is America. Like how, you know, and the reason I mentioned his background and his age and stuff, he's like, it's not that complicated.
Yeah.
You know, you just got to look at a map and look at the travels of indigenous peoples, you know, that may have even come from Asia over the Bering. Like, nobody's 100% sure, but like, anyway, it's the U.S., man. Like,
and it's pop culture, you know.
It's deeper than that. I mean, most people around the world think of America as this place,
no, they
but it's
say
like that ain't...
oh, Americans, you know, like they always have
or
that,
want to go to America. They're not talking about... But, they will be soon. Like yesterday, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
Like,
I mean, it's very much like... what was the point of going...
Oh, you were talking about you're in school, you would argue with your teachers.
Yeah, I would argue with my
teachers.
So my thing was with these boys, I was like, don't forget, you know, our roots, but also don't forget what surrounds us, you know, like, don't forget where we are. Like, we have to think larger than our streets. We have to think larger than our cities. We have to think completely like, and just try to reach outside of where we are, because a lot of people around the world struggle. And I know that, our communities struggle, but we're kind of sort of like left alone, and we're left to struggle. So we have to figure out ways to fight to basically get our word across.
Are you talking just so I know, you're talking about like Spanish speaking communities, or what when you say
like
our community?
Black and brown communities, you know, like
yes.
Even some Asian communities. I remember growing up in, especially East LA, there's Alhambra, like San Gabriel Valley. There's a lot of Asian communities.
And they're not all rich, man.
Yeah. But I remember, you know, understanding this like very young, because my uncles and them were very much into defending civil rights, standing with our black brothers and sisters, like marching and like I was at a lot of marches at a young age with my father and my uncles and stuff. So it was really interesting to like still have that impact within ourselves. So even when I'm dancing, it's very much rooted in, you know, activism, because I'm like, I'm not gonna just not say that it's not a part of it, because it is. Like, our struggle is why we can survive with this dance and be amazing at it, you know? It's like, it's a part of that drive to be great. So yeah, it was really like our movement was more so, all of this was embedded, you know, and like their experiences as well as individual men, Rock Swift and Devious and Pierre, is deep rooted in indigenous culture as well. So understanding their connection to Mexico, and like even going to Mexico and being considered like pocho, or, you know, we're gringos because we speak English and we don't fully fluently speak Spanish at times. So there's like a very disconnect, but yet a lot of us have freedoms to talk about Mexico as if we're actual Mexicans from Mexico. So there's like this really crazy feud in this information, and I feel like this is not our place, you know? Like, our place is not to speak about like what Mexico has to deal with as a Mexican. We need to realize like we are Chicanos, like we are of Latin indigenous roots, and we are of course Mexican descent, whereas the boys, they're Costa Rican and of Mexican descent. So there's a big mixture of like cultures within our movement that kind of still drives. Pierre also being mixed Salvadorian and Mexicano. It's like you're very much still representing for something that's more than yourself, but also disconnected because you're not from the source of where your blood comes from. But in reality, our lands here are all pretty much deeply connected. That's the way we see it, but it's very much different when somebody's born in the 80s in Mexico. They're Mexican, you know? So I can't argue either is right or wrong.
And I think, like, unfortunately, people all over the world are kind of, I don't know if the word brainwashed, but like, you can find this almost anywhere, right? Because I'm sure a lot of Mexicans who might come at you with this attitude, they're not really right either, right? And then Mexico has its own whole set of like...
So this is where it gets crazier,
right?
bro.
And it's like there's no...
When you connect street culture into like our everyday lives, a lot of our ex-cons or our, you know, it's like we're kind of forced to think like this is our life. Like, we have to end up in jail. We have to end up in a gang. This is like how we grow up with that sort of mentality. But the sad thing is, inside of those walls, the mentality is like, you know, only the strong survive. But it's also rooted in indigenous culture. So it becomes very tribalistic within that system. So our prison system, our school to prison pipeline is so much rooted in like racism, you know, and it's systemic. It's not necessarily like we were brain fed to be this way, and then that influenced the streets itself.
Yeah.
So a lot of people who are, you know, a lot of our Latino families were very much like, just hush, don't say nothing, don't worry, like just keep working, keep driving. And sadly, that ended up backfiring on us because we kind of just let things happen. And because we didn't stand our ground and fought for, you know, or actually put out there that we fought for a lot of people's rights, alongside people's rights, we kind of get shunned as the white man because we're Mexican American. Like, that doesn't really... So
you're speaking from some experience. You did end up behind those walls for a minute, right? And I've never heard this perspective on it. It sounds like what you're saying is that, well, so you ended up in prison for
Yeah, for almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years.
Federal prison.
Federal prison. So you ended up with the Mexican prisoners, right?
Yeah.
Because of what you're talking about. Because
Yeah.
it's just like you go and everybody's
By association.
been kind of conditioned into this thing.
By association, even doing like county time, just for, at times where I was really kind of fighting for survival, and I would have to get to work and just do my job. Times I'd get pulled over because I'm driving without a license, or it's I have a warrant for my arrest because I had a ticket for this and I wasn't able to afford it at the time. But now that I got this job, I can afford it, and now I have to go back to jail because, and sadly, and then boom, I lose this job. So it's like a constant system that is like, well, you could just take the bus. Yeah, sure, I'm gonna wake up 4 hours before my time just to get to work, and then
that's what it is in LA. It could be easily be 4 hours.
So,
how did you, especially if you're in federal, you're in federal prison for 2 years, and you did not end up as a lifer Southsider, right?
No.
Like, how did you maintain that I'm more than this, and survive in that, and all of that?
Believe it or not, it was the homies. Like, the homies were the ones that realized, they were the ones that made me see through their eyes. Like, every time I would tell my story, or I would talk about my friends and who they are, and then, damn, I would see them on TV, and I see them in a commercial. I see them in the music videos we're watching, music video awards we're watching, or even a movie that would just showcase. And I'm going like, that's the homie right there. Like, and they're like, nah, bro. And I remember pulling out pictures like, look at fool, that's homeboy right there, And they're just like, so it was like a constant reminder for them to me, like, what the fuck are you doing here?
Oh, wow. So they didn't want to pull you in.
It was
like ruin you or whatever. I don't know what the proper term is.
I mean, just not even that. It was just more so like you have a talent, you have like, and it's weird how this dance really actually impacts. Like, and this is why I know it's so.
It literally saved your life.
It's crazy, bro. Like, dancing in county jail, the homie was like, fuck yeah, bro, you get down like that? That's fucking dope. Like, I'm going to come to your pad next time, fool, when I get out. Watch, I'm going to have my boombox. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to play this shit, and we're just going to fucking boogie, bro. Like, I'll never forget the homie that would say that and made me laugh so fucking hard, the way he did it. And he was just acting out the whole thing. I got my fucking shit. Bam. Put it down, fool. We're going to fucking boogie. And I just remember going like, damn, like this, like, whether I'm a gangster or not, it still lights people up in a specific way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But mind you, I'm dancing on the yard in prison now, like in the federal prison, and people randomly would come up to me and like, hey, bro, like, remember this dude with the big, like, HALA on his stomach, this big OG, and he was just like, hey, man, you know Michael Chambers? Like, in his, like, super, Cholo accent. I said, Michael Chambers, dog? I'm like, yeah. Like, I know Shrimp. He's like, yeah, Boogaloo Shrimp. He goes, yeah, he used to come over to my house on Sundays for menudo. And my grandma would feed him and shit, And I was like, damn, that's crazy. So I met cats that knew the homies, Booyah Tribe, Mr. Ree. Like, these are some of my mentors. Like, I met this cat named Tidal Wave, who was a random dude with a cane just popping, like, in the yard. Like, he was a brother. And, like, you can mingle at certain times, and certain times you can't. But eventually I would like be able to talk with this cat, and then we'd tell stories and we talk about similarities, and then just, we had this understanding, like, this is what brings us together. This is what I was,
even in this system.
Yeah.
That breaks down a barrier.
But,
that's amazing, dude.
Yeah. Like, and the reality behind that is, like, when you're deep rooted in understanding where racism comes from, it's like you're in this place where people are, brainwashed to be that way. And you have to really kind of see it for what it is. And to me, it's like one of the most heartbreaking, like, And I told myself I'll never experience this again. Like I would never put myself in that environment to be anywhere in that vicinity ever again. And the hardest part is like, you know, when you choose to run with a certain pack, like it can't be held against you. It can't be, because you're in there to basically survive. And if you don't, you're just you're an outsider, you're this. But I needed to experience that. I needed to feel that. I needed to understand this is what I don't ever want to be again. Like in this kind of position, in this form of society, and like I don't want to be this statistic anymore. Like I'm over it. Like I'm over fighting to survive and thinking that, you know, I have to fight this way when I can literally use my art form to fight a whole different way. So yeah, it was hard, man. Like I think the most heartbreaking for me, and I'll be super transparent, like I really, like, I remember this black kid coming up to me and wanting to learn. And he's like a young cat. And you could tell he's like in his early 20s. And I'm like, you know, like first thing I want to do is like, what are you in here for, fool? You know, like, what's wrong with you? You know, but at the same time, I'm going, oh, fuck, I'm in here too, fool. You know, so it's the reality behind that. But like realizing even the place that I was at, I couldn't even be. I was like, fuck. And the homies like finally told me, hey, bro, like, you know, that area is like a lot of chomos are in there, child molesters. Like, you can't be like, all right, cool. So I had to figure out my way out of that situation. And like, I'm not saying that the young kid came up to me was a chomo, like, not even that. It just, when you realize you can't share certain things,
that's
you're
crazy.
restricted
Like,
by
it seems
it,
like all you've been talking about is not the deprivation aspect of being inside. It's the like extreme cultural division.
And that's a big reality, you know, like.
Yeah, well, and why the fuck all these people on the outside want to bring that back is just insane.
It's and because it's like I think a lot of these systems work in that way.
It's
because of that.
You divide people, and then you know, and they can't fight you, they're fighting each other.
I you know, that really made me understand systemic on a whole different level. Like seeing the guards, they all have, you know, Latino last names, and you know, I'm like, this is crazy. It could be a whole entire. I mean, I have like Transcend, the little mini doc that my homie Icon made, Sleepy Tut, that talks a little bit more in depth about, you know, the situation. It started off as a few questions.
Is that like on YouTube or something?
Yeah.
I can link out to that.
Yeah, Transcend.
And, you know, you've been more than generous with your time, but I do. First of all, I appreciate you talking about this shit. It's so important, right?
No, it is.
And,
I mean,
you could be like, I don't want to talk about it. I understand, but it's so important, and I do want to like make sure you talk about what you're doing now. Like you mentioned, educating people.
Yeah.
I've seen you teach, and it's kind of like a whole different side of you. At least what I've seen.
Yeah.
Just a little more animated, and you're funny as shit, which is incredible. You're like, yeah, I'm funny. you're really funny.
I just love to have fun, man.
And so, where can people find you to learn from you, et cetera, besides the big events where we all know we can find you?
I mean, my Instagram is my main like source of social media.
You mentioned you got a new website?
Yeah. So I have a website. It's boogiefrantick.com. But I'm releasing these first like 4 classes. It's like 2 foundational classes. One is just strictly foundation on what I feel is foundation is when it comes to like the approach of popping and walking into it. Then it's a foundation of animation, which kind of doesn't really go style specific, kind of more goes into the mindset and like like how to actually calculate what I can dance to versus what I can't, or what I'm thinking it is, you know. So it's kind of like a really good direction of like, all right, we can like end here. Then I go into style specific with ticking and then waving. So I'm gonna release it again, I think, for Black Friday.
When you say release, do you mean you have a curriculum that people can sign up for, or you actually have a video class that's...
It's a video class. It's already...
You can purchase.
It's already, yeah. It's
Okay.
pre-recorded. Like, it took a year to piece this one together. But the main project that this is going to help kind of create has been, like, in the works for the last maybe 4 years.
What is that project?
I want to do a very beginner course. Like an entire lesson plan
Of popping?
Of not even popping.
Oh, okay.
Like just get intro into popping.
Okay.
So there's no technique. It's literally just music and movement and understanding, like, you know, the shapes of your body. I have a complete footwork diagram that basically eventually you build up to. You learn how to work and maneuver your footwork into. So it's kind of like how my brain works and my practices, but I've just understood that how I picked and learned, I need to actually be able to teach the next educators.
Nice.
So I have a complete beginner program. It's like 13 lessons or 12 to 13 lessons, but each lesson it overlaps one another.
Okay.
So you can't just jump into lesson 4. Like the
Right.
one I just released is like, you know, more so kind of like you can go into foundation and then go into waving.
Yeah.
But all of them intertwine with each other regardless. So this is kind of like a preview of what I want to kind of create. So I'm giving out a lot of this dope information. But the videos are like probably up from an hour to a little over an hour. And I go super in depth into even music, and each lesson has its own song. So it's like something you can constantly kind of pick up and practice to.
Okay.
But really it's like, and feedback, you know, like for this one that I released on October 6th, giving more so a feedback on the videos and the practices. There's like requirements. They need to practice at least 6 hours. So there's a lot of give on this one, but I think for the Black Friday one, I'm just gonna give the video information, give a super discount, and see how people provide feedback on that end.
Nice.
Yeah. So
Nice.
I would just want to improve. You know what I mean? I'm not here to just be like, yo, I'm gonna teach this information, take my class. Like I really do love understanding how my students learn, and it helps me just become that much of a better teacher. So I love this community, and I want it to grow. I want it to be better. I want people that compete to drive for, you know, their own greatness in a different way.
Yeah.
To always challenge themselves. Like I really get disappointed when I hear a lot of the OGs like just talking down on this new generation as if like they're not really doing the hard work and stuff like that. So I'm kind of like, all right, you know, I hear you guys out, but I also hear them, and I see where we are today, and I see how much easier it is to kind of get complimented, you know what I mean? And it wasn't like that for us, so I understand, like, we didn't have social medias and all that stuff.
Yeah,
so,
and, you know, no matter... I mean, Socrates complained about the younger generation, right?
Yeah,
like, this
yeah.
is an age-old...
It's an age-old thing,
and I'm with
yeah,
you.
yeah.
I think... Like, I've seen it in dance, but I've seen it in lots of other arenas, and I always am just like, you know what? Because I'm a middle-aged dude. I have friends that'll start talking. Like, I'm just like, I don't want to hear it, man.
Yeah, like young musicians,
like just,
and I'm sure... Yeah.
Or whatever, or students, you know, any young student.
Yeah,
It's just like...
Yeah.
You were a schmuck, too,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And, like,
we all were.
Just... Ultimately, it's about people getting together and...
Yeah.
dealing with
In
one
the end,
another.
it's when it comes down to it, like... I used to host a lot of sessions, man, and to me, just creating a safe space for people to feel comfortable enough to come through and just like exchange is a beautiful thing.
It really is.
But it becomes, when it starts to become superficial, then it's like, okay, now how do you cut the cord, you know, or how do you find the cancer and then deal with that situation?
Yeah.
But that's part of being a community leader, is learning that, like, how do I approach these certain individuals and show them like, yo, you're kind of changing the energy here. Like, why not, instead of trying to make it so much about yourself, why don't you make it a part of us? Like, how can we incorporate this and like involve it more? So I think a lot of leaders, some leaders tend to forgot that part of it.
But
you
that
know?
message definitely, like, I know there's a lot of, I know people are missing like these kind of sessions, right? But I've been to a couple recently. You know T. Custon?
Yeah, yeah.
He started throwing a Monday session that is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
beautiful. It's focused on hip hop, but anybody can show up, and like there's a sit down and like everybody talk part of it, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I just went to a couple nights ago a battle session that Cap J and somebody else had thrown, and Cap J's really young.
Yeah.
But he had Super Dave there as the judge.
Yeah.
And it was a battle just to practice battling. It wasn't about, you know,
No, and it's smart.
it wasn't about him. Like, it wasn't about, you know.
It's smart. It's
and it was
smart,
nice.
man.
It was like that community feeling. It was like, if you want to be here to get better, this is the place for it. If you just
Yeah.
want to get here and like experience community, it's a place for it.
Yeah.
And it was not ego driven. And man, that kid can freaking dance.
Yeah.
I was super impressed by that because I know he's really young and like he gets a lot of attention. And he could be super ego driven.
Yeah.
But it was not like that at all.
Yes.
So I think like ultimately people like yourself are getting through.
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of our I mean, I would hope it's our manifestation. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm the cause of it, but it's like this is things like that are what I hope to manifest because I mean I see it like when I'm surrounded by so many dope dancers and I'm just looking at their drive and I'm going like, damn, you don't look motivated. You know, like how I'm like right away my brain goes, how can I help this person? Like,
Yeah.
it's like it's constant community like action happening, you know, but in the end it's like right now I think I had to deal with a lot of my own situations to kind of like, okay, I want to come back to this community, not come back. I mean, I'm still in it, but it's just more so I want to open up space where like, all right, this is how we're going to battle. Let's figure it out this way. Let's like, you know, and be more strategic with our actions so that we understand the game aspect of it, you know, and it's like, and trying to make it overly personal, I realize right now in this day, like what's holding popping back is the fact that we don't have a scoring system. And that's always going to be our issue because now it goes based off of your preference. But your preference could be nice shoes. And anybody with nice shoes naturally is going to get a higher point. So it's like it could be that dumb, you know what I mean? But also that tedious to a degree. But that also could be the dancer's fault as well for not really wanting to present themselves in a way that actually showcases I do see myself as, you know, an actual like dancer or an artist or a performer or, you know, a practitioner of this or, you know, a master of this. Like it really does take so many different efforts. And I feel once we can grow from that, I feel like, then I know for a fact these competitions that are labeled as like, this is what we're judging on makes it so much easier for these dancers to train for.
Makes it easier for the judges too.
That too. But if I knew I needed to do all of this to get a win or to be in at least top 16, bro, like it would have just been like, oh, that's all you want? Like, psh.
I just to wrap this up, man. Thanks again for all your time and for being like so transparent. And I feel really lucky to have come into this community and right off the bat met people like you and like Slim and like she and you know these people who are just like I don't know, just kind of all about it in the way that you're talking about, right? And I've met so many of you now and continue to build these relationships, and I feel like even though I know there's a lot of concern on your part, I gotta say as someone who's a little bit more detached from it, you're like nurturing a lot of people, man. Like for all the, you know, concern you might have, there's a lot of positive growth going on, and a lot of people coming in under your umbrellas, and the message is definitely getting out there.
No, and that's, you know, I just want to show through my own integrity, like the caring doesn't stop. You know what I mean? And I know people see it, like me going to this Red Bull last weekend and just showing face and talking to everybody like, hey man, how's it going? Like, you good? Like, you know, keep doing your thing, and you know, I'm proud of you. Like, I really do. I'm not doing that just for shits and giggles. Like, I really do actually watch.
No, I think honestly, dude, I think we have this in common.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you noticed, but when I'm always going up to younger dancers, and if I see somebody who's dope, I tell them.
Yeah.
Because like I know what that means as a young person to hear that.
Same.
Like, you know, like.
Same.
And it doesn't really matter that I'm not necessarily a dancer. It's just like I appreciate what you're doing, and it spoke to me.
I remember getting shitted on, bro, from OGs, and just like, you know, but obviously I'm
There's a place for that.
I'm a different generation,
but there's
bro,
a place for that.
I remember coming straight for that motherfucker. Like, I'm like, yo, that person's just gonna respect me, and I think a part of that is why I carry the name that I do, even in our popping world that like nobody really sees here unless they know, like the Homeland events and like, you know, Funny Bones events, and like I know for a fact I carry a good respect. The Poppers picnics, like I haven't been in like years, and I just went to one, and I remember people like talking as if like they're kind of looking at me like, all right, we see you, like you got gray hair now, like now you think you're one of us, you know what I mean? And in my head I'm going, fuck no, I'll smoke you, bro. Like, that's what I think. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I'm one of you. I'm in my own lane at this point. But that's where the confidence comes in, and I'm like, but again, I'm also speaking for the next generation. Yeah. You know, that's a constant. I think just having the name itself is the responsibility of understanding. Like, now, my responsibility before was to educate people on who I am. But now it's more so, now I have to carry this integrity along with it, and I'm just hoping that, you know, the next generation learns how to do it just better.
Some of them will, some of them won't.
They will.
But hey, man, thank you so much.
Of course,
I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, brother.
If you got